Okay.
Can you talk about the time frame for when you might convene?
The time frame?
Yes.
I can't actually because that's something that we haven't come to terms with. I mean, obviously this is the summer. I had two members of the Republican caucus approach me after that meeting and say, hey, I'm going to Lake Powell next week. So, you know, that's going to be a challenge, frankly, as we move through the summer, the next couple of weeks, to find a time when the House can convene. But we'll work with the minority party as well as the members of the majority party and make sure that there's a time in the next couple of weeks when we can all convene here at the Capitol, sooner rather than later.
Will this be done before the next interim then?
That's our intent, yes.
So, and because it's just House rules, you can just convene whenever, is that correct?
Yes.
That's the process.
It's an internal rule of the House of Representatives, and so we will convene as the House and have a rules resolution presented and debate it and pass it.
Have
So
you
no,
ever
no
done
vote
this
is
before?
necessary?
Well, we will have a vote.
No, I mean no vote to convene is necessary. You just call in the session.
That's correct.
Okay.
Internal
that
House
power
business.
as
Mhm.
Speaker.
Yes.
But have you ever done this before? Have you ever?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so it's never been tried in the courts or anyplace else, and no other house has ever called himself into session.
Not that we're aware of in the state of Utah, but clearly the internal rules and workings of the House of Representatives is our own purview, as is the Senate's, right? So they could do the same thing, as could the legislature, as the House and the Senate in terms of a joint rule. So it is clearly within the purview of the House of Representatives to convene itself in order to do internal business.
There are questions about the power that this group can have in terms of, I believe cloak was one of the terms, mantle of
Oh.
impeachment.
Sure.
That creates a lot more difficulty in challenging the actions of a committee like this, or even the formation of a committee like this. Why was the decision made not to go forward through the impeachment process and going this way?
So what had become very apparent from the caucus discussion was that we needed more information, as our majority leader so very well stated, is that we need our own information. We need information that we can own as a House of Representatives, not information from anonymous sources, not information from the press, not information from innuendo and that, but information, facts that we can gather as a House of Representatives and move forward based on that information. So it became very apparent that that's where the Republican caucus wanted to go. We were already aware that the Democrat caucus had the same kinds of inclinations to go that direction, and so having this investigative committee is really going to do that work and be able to provide the House with the facts.
But you could have gone through the impeachment process to create the same kind of committee, and it might have been more bulletproof in the courts. Why go this route?
Might have been. Remember that what this allows us to do is investigation and establish facts, and then decide whether to move forward or not in an impeachment process based on the facts that the House's investigative committee would find.
But you have that same option under the impeachment process, whether to go forward with articles of
Sure.
impeachment.
If you want
Lisa, we pointed out in our caucus that 11 states, when looking at a process of impeachment, their body needed information to make that very decision whether to do it. Absent more information, you might find a caucus that isn't right now with a threshold of information ready to impeach. So you may have more protections as you've described, but the practical ability to put that committee together, absent information, may have undermined that effort. So to put a committee together like other states have done in situations that are similar to this will allow for the House to collect information, to hear testimony, to issue subpoenas, and with that information, then a decision whether to proceed or not is more relevant. And I think our caucus will be more comfortable making a decision to proceed or not once they have that information.
Commissioner the Whip, was that a question of votes? You didn't have the votes for going forward with impeachment, but you did for this?
No hard votes, just a general sentiment in that caucus, if you've heard, of concern about a process. We want a process that you can interchange any parts, any party, and that process would still look the same. And I think that to get to that place, to have a process that you can point to, you needed information to buttress the process moving forward.
So this was a bit of a political compromise then within the Republican caucus?
I think it's, Bob, I think it's a process. It's an agreement on a process that you can stand by, that you can point to your constituencies and the public that has integrity, that is going to have information from all sides, at least the attempt to gather that information. And again, gathering that information will buttress and will support whatever decision we decide to make. But more information is certainly better than less.
Do you envision this committee being, the work of the committee being public?
Absolutely.
You had the discussion during the caucus about the immunity, and it was clear, I think, in impeachment auspices, you had the immunity authority. Do you have the immunity, power to extend immunity to people who might otherwise take the fifth if they're?
We believe so. We believe so,
Under the
that is a power vested to the legislature under the investigative powers.
Can you talk about the evolution of the motion made today, how you came to it? It seems like Representative Wilson talked about he was editing it throughout the meeting, but it also
Let
seemed
the
like it
majority
probably
leader talk
has been
about that.
something leadership has been coming to over time.
Let me make a point very, very quickly. Maybe answer a couple of questions here. You know, I want everybody to know that, no, this is not a compromise that we tried to go with our caucus and say, hey, what will you vote for and what will you vote for? We didn't count votes of the caucus to see who would be in favor of starting the impeachment process today and who would not. What we did is we listened over the last month to our caucus members, and we listened to their concerns, and we listened to their questions. And over that process, we have, as a leadership team, as we should, maybe met for, well, not maybe, but we've met for hours and hours and hours together to find an avenue that would address all of the concerns of our caucus members. Obviously, we can't meet everyone, but for all those things that came to us from every side you can imagine, we tried to address those issues. And then, I'm not sure you call it a compromise, because our caucus discussed it today. You may have heard several times that this motion was referred to, even before the motion was made. So we're looking for a pathway that brings all of the caucus in for their concerns. And I think we reached that today. We found a thing that works for everyone involved and involves the entire caucus. It's not whether we had the votes or not, it's whether we're listening to our constituents and our caucus members.
But it seems like it was almost orchestrated from the outset, that the 2 hours, 3 hours of discussion you had didn't necessarily influence the motion that was made at the end of the
It certainly did influence the motion.
Representative Wilson mentioned that he had amended it all throughout the meeting, so that leads me to believe that there was something that was an original template to start from. So I guess
Yep.
when was that template?
Can I say, Billy, if it's thought that the leadership team had absolutely no idea or aspiration for bringing this caucus together, that would be inaccurate. We certainly have met yesterday. We met at great lengths. We met today. I'll tell you that honestly and candidly, what we talked about yesterday evolved over yesterday and today. But certainly as a leadership team, talking to our colleagues, we had a pretty good idea where we thought the concerns were amongst the caucus. If you did not hear the talk of investigative committee, what the role was, which is all consistent with what happened in that caucus today, that motion may have been in a round file before we got halfway through, and you would have seen something that would have emerged from that caucus. I think that motion is very consistent with the questions that came from colleagues, the questions asked of our general counsel, and ultimately from the vote you got from that motion. It is a culmination of what we as a leadership team thought we saw and wanted to see from our caucus in terms of being united with a way forward. And then I thought that caucus discussion was consistent with the motion.
I think I understand that it was fluid and that you were willing to evolve and change and adapt, and I appreciate that. I just am curious about when it started. That's all.
So one of the things I think you have to realize is we've talked with our colleagues, as we've talked with constituents over the past months. One of the things I think we recognize is half the people wanted to impeach, half the people didn't want to, and the other half weren't sure what they wanted. And I say that exactly that way. I did that on purpose. I think it's that exaggerated in the situation, that there's a myriad of emotions in this, and I think as House leadership, we worked with the colleagues, we put together a process today that I think worked very well. I think that the state and the people and the trust of our people in this state will be well served by the process that we put in place, and I'm very comfortable with it.
Representative, does that comment address your constituents or the caucus itself?
Both.
We all sat through several hours of legal definition about the difference between starting the impeachment process with an investigation and creating a separate investigative committee. How's the general public gonna take this? So aren't they gonna see you as going through starting an impeachment process? How are they not?
Well, this is distinct. As our general counsel presented to us, we came to a fork in the road. One fork was to move forward under the constitutional authority of impeachment. The other was to move forward in a different manner under the authority granted the legislature to do investigative work. And the caucus, the Republican caucus, felt more comfortable at this point, at this juncture, to go with an investigative committee and not to take the route of the constitutional impeachment. So I think it's very clearly delineated. This is different. This committee has no power or authority to suggest impeachment or suggest articles of impeachment or anything. All this committee would have the power to do is to investigate and have findings of fact, if you will, and present them to the House.
But this doesn't rule out impeachment. If we
No, in the
want.
future, surely not. But this committee is not an impeachment investigative committee. This is an investigative committee only.
Whereas an impeachment committee would be focused exclusively on an elected official, does this have the ability to expand the scope to other individuals who might be in the office or might have done something that might be untoward but not subject to impeachment?
Possibly, based on the facts that they might uncover in their investigation.
The committee
Is
chair.
I'm sorry, Representative Cox, I think, called this the pretend impeachment committee.
I think that was an
attempted.
attempt at humor. I hope.
Okay.
I'm sure it was.
So,
Does this going with the investigative committee also mean that you could look at Swallow's actions before he was in office, and it takes away that argument of what the modifier is and you know?
but remember that argument would happen even if we were in the impeachment process of what is the modifier, what does in
No, but what I'm
office
saying-
modify, but this committee could investigate it. We have very broad
So you could look at what he did
investigatory
before
powers
he
as
was
the
in office.
legislature. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any timeline for the investigative committee to report back with its findings?
Not in the motion. I would hope that when we get together as a House, that would be some of the things that we consider in terms of the timing, in terms of the, obviously the makeup of the committee, the rules of the committee. We have interim rules, we have joint rules, we have House rules, we have all these kinds of things that govern our behavior here. And so we're going to have to take some time with our staff and draft up a possible resolution on this issue, and then take it to the body and have them debate it and work through all of the details, and we'll have a finished product at the end of the House session.
When you've researched what other states have done, what does it take to staff an investigation? I mean,
Sure,
do
I'm
you
gonna
have to-
let our whip
Yeah.
talk to that, because he's done the most research on that issue in particular, on what other
You need
states have done.
detectives, you need
So-
lawyers, what do you need?
So, Max, in looking at the other states, you've had a special investigator. In one state, we had a retired judge that was able to be an investigator and on his own bring that information together, even review grand jury testimony prior to a grand jury making a decision. You have a committee that's put together, and they have a special counsel that is uniquely hired, that has experience in investigative procedure and things like that. So I would imagine that this process we're putting together will have all the ability and all the staffing necessary to, again, we want, and I think the majority leader talked about this, we want to own the information. I don't know that a process by media report only is one that we would want to create as a precedent. I think that, not that it's not helpful, not that we don't appreciate the good reporting, but I think that there needs to be, within this process, absent the 4 investigative bodies that apparently are out there and not providing information right now, there has to be a way for us to glean information in an independent fashion. And so the committee will look like that. And I think it's we'll stare at it. There's no exact
Yeah.
template for how that looks in any state.
I mean, I guess,
But-
is it just like the individual committee members on Google, or is it, you know, I mean, I'm serious
Yeah.
though,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, there's legwork to do.
No question.
There is.
And we know that. And we understand through meeting with our own council that there will be some costs. I think you'll probably see a good attorney that will assist the committee that is maybe outside of our ledge research. We'll bring on an attorney. We need to have an investigator that we can rely on. I think you'll see an investigator come on board. What we're trying to do, and I think we alluded to that inside, is we're trying to have our committee function as the committee and have our staff to the committee so we can save those tax dollars, but we are going to need probably an outside counsel and probably an outside investigator to help us with this, but we understand that.
Bipartisan committee.
Yes.
The Democrats complained that they were not part of today's discussion. Obviously, this was the Republican caucus, but you, in effect, because of your supermajority, made a decision today that you need to go forward and
Sure, remember, this is the decision of the Republican caucus. We already knew the decision of the Democrat caucus, which I think this fits very nicely with. The Democrat caucus had either asked to begin impeachment proceedings or to have an investigation. Our caucus, as the Republicans, as the majority party, had came to the same conclusion, if you will, in terms of an investigation. So we agree. The minority caucus agrees with the majority caucus.
Do you
And-
hope that this action today will convince Swallow to resign?
You know, this question of resignation is completely up to the Attorney General himself.
I understand that, but do you hope that the fact that you are willing to move forward and begin this process?
Well, remember, he has said multiple times very publicly that he welcomes investigation. He himself says, even though the investigation had already started, he claims that he asked for the FBI to investigate. So we hope that if he continues in office, that he will cooperate with the House investigation. He seems to indicate, at least up until now, he's indicated that he would welcome these kinds of investigations, and so we will hold him at his word.
How did each of you learn of the initial allegations? How did that information about unsavory allegations about the Attorney General's office, how did that first come to you?
Sure, most of us, I think, and I know me specifically, it's what was in the paper, right? We don't have any special knowledge about investigations going on by any entities. We know what we read in the paper, and that we don't have special information on that.
Do you have a sense of whether this is going to be balanced, partisan line? And most of the committees have a Republican tilt because that's the
Yeah,
Republican majority, but
we have yet to
the
really
ethics
talk
committee-
about that. It will be bipartisan. Whether or not it's equal or reflects the makeup of the body, that has yet to be even talked about.
Do you think the caucus made a statement today? I mean, they adopted this in a fairly overwhelming fashion. I think I heard 3 or 4 people voted no at the end of it all. Do you think they made a statement about the concerns they have about what's being raised?
Sure, I mean, just as you said, it was a very overwhelming vote in terms of moving forward with investigation. We've all, as a body, been somewhat frustrated with the lack of information. We appreciate the information coming out of the press, but it is just that, it's information coming out of the press. And so, as our majority leader has said, we want our own information. We want to be able to own that information as the representatives of the people. And so what you saw in there was a reflection of that. We want to do our investigation. We want our constituents to know that this is an issue important to us, and we know it's important to them. We want the facts. And then when we have the facts before us, then we can make a good decision of what to do at that point.
Will the information collected be, maybe the attorneys can answer this, will it be subject to grandma?
We're planning on having open meetings.
Yeah.
And so, subject to grandma or not, I think is moot, right?
Well, I mean, if there's documents turned over, depositions
Sure.
taken.
I think we have to consult with our counsel on that in terms of the technicalities of that.
You mentioned that the Attorney General claimed to have requested an investigation, even though it was already going on. It sounded like you were suggesting that you question his sincerity on that.
No, I don't question his sincerity. I question the timing. And some of the timelines that are out there by various groups and various people seem to indicate that the investigation by the FBI started before the Attorney General asked to have it start. So it's just one of those things in the fact pattern, if you will, or in the sequence of events that doesn't seem quite to match up.
It's an indication that the House Republicans have lost confidence in the Attorney General's office.
I think it's an indication that the House Republicans want more information.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.